5 times faster, 5 times more productive, 5 times better. That's the difference in productivity when you're in the flow state.
That's Kevin Bailey, CEO of Dreamfuel, whose team has coached over 1,000 executives at companies like Smartsheet, Greenlight Guru, and Owner.com. And today's conversation is all about how leaders can cascade superior mental performance through their entire revenue org.
If you learn how to control the dopamine of your team, you can push through the hard parts where your competitors will falter.
But executing this properly isn't about corporate wellness retreats. It's about understanding neurochemistry. And Kevin says most leaders are leaving their teams completely exposed.
Once you've deployed the effort molecule, noradrenaline, for long enough, and there's no dopamine coming in, the brain goes, all right, we need to quit. We're done.
So we get tactical, covering specific pre-call routines that directly translate into larger commission checks. Why every executive needs a serotonin day, and the reason why typical manifestation advice is completely backwards. If you want a clear path to higher levels of performance for yourself and your team, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Revenue Leadership Podcast. A quick PSA, there's a change coming to the Revenue Leadership Podcast. I've moved my show to a new YouTube account. So if you enjoy the show, I recommend you go subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes and a bunch of other content that will be on there. And you can find the new channel at youtube.com/@Kyle-Norton. The channel name is Kyle Norton, the Revenue Leadership Podcast. And that's where we're going to be posting all the future episodes, clips, and a bunch of new stuff as well. And if you're wondering, the audio podcast will still be in all of the same places that it's always been, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Snips, and so on. So if you listen in audio only form, no need to do anything. But if you watch on YouTube, now you know where to find future episodes. And while I'm at it, I would love if everybody could support the show by liking, subscribing, reviewing, leaving a comment on whatever platform they listen on. It helps new viewers find the podcast. It's really helpful for us, and I always forget to mention it. If you love the pod or even like it a little bit, do us a solid and go review it, comment, share it with a friend, and that would be most appreciated. And now let's get back to the show. All right, welcome back to the pod. You will see a familiar face in front of you, Kevin Bailey, for a second time in about as many months. So Kevin and I recorded the pod about 2 months ago on mental performance and psychology and thinking about our physiology in a different way. And it was the single most popular episode I've ever recorded by a pretty good shot, if I'm just going off of the number of text messages and Slacks and emails that I got. Given the nature of the conversation, we only got halfway through my docket. I had like 2 things I wanted to cover with Kevin, which was, one, how do executives think about mental performance and their own physiology? And then how can we bring this to our teams? And we basically barely got through how we can think of this as executives for ourselves. And so I wanted to bring Kevin back to have the second part of the conversation, which is, now we are more bought into and starting to build our own practice. How do we cascade this through our organization? What are some of the benefits that we can expect? So I'm excited for this one. You have your own large shoes to fill. So I'm excited and appreciate you coming back on.
I'm pumped. Thank you for having me again, Kyle.
If you haven't already listened to the first episode, go start there. I think that's like important context setting to get the most value out of this one. And in episode 1, we talked about how as business people and as humans, we can understand our physiology different. We talked about, the default mode network, the amygdala, these 4 states of the nervous system. And then we unpacked some tools to use to modify our own physiology with intention to show up better, more calm, more focused, all of these things in not just a work environment, obviously that's the framing here, but throughout our lives. And so today we're going to talk about how to bring some of these practices to our teams, because it is like a bit of a tightrope to walk. And this is probably the part of the owner culture that on the outside I get the most critical feedback about. People, if you do this the wrong way, it can be overstepping. That is the commentary I see sometimes on like LinkedIn or Reddit, although I don't go there personally. I've heard the stories that people feel like this is not a leader or a business's place to have an opinion with their employees. which I agree. Like, you can't force this upon anybody. But the reason that I have become so passionate about this myself, and why I've wanted to bring these tools to my team, and why it's such a big part of the owner revenue culture, is because in retrospect, just desperately wish I was exposed to these things earlier in my career. Like, I didn't come across some of this stuff until my late 20s, early 30s. I was almost 10 years into my career when I really started to develop a gratitude practice and meditation, and cold plunging only in the last like 4 or 5 years. And so I'm passionate about bringing this to the team, but you have to do it in the right way. So we're going to unpack that today, set up some of the core pillars and principles for how leaders should think about bringing mental performance to their organization, and the like do's and do nots, and then we'll get into some of the specifics.
I think you do a really good job with it, Kyle, as the leader does need to embody the practices, and they do sort of cascade down to the team naturally when the leader embodies the practices and prioritizes them. So I think that's like the first place to start. Is this isn't something you just like deploy on a team like, cool, you guys do this, I'm going to do my thing. If the leader gets jazzed about it and he gets really involved, the team will follow. The feedback you gave that maybe people get sometimes about mental performance training is recovery often happens outside the office. So when you're trying to train a team on how to optimize their performance, you do have to at least educate them on how to recover effectively. So you're bridging into talking about hours that you don't own, hours that are off the clock. And I think that's where people get a little concerned with overstepping. But again, there are ways to work this into a team so that they love it, have a great experience with it, become better humans through it, and increase performance. The first people who will adopt this is going to be your A players who are trying to squeeze out an extra 5 to 10% of performance. So same with professional athletes. The reason why this is deployed with professional athletes is because they care the most. They want to win. They're edging out other super high performers, and that extra 5-10% means a whole lot to them. The players who maybe are young and inexperienced, but realize that this is a way to catapult them into being an A player and probably gain more like 10-20% in performance, they'll also embrace it. C players who are more or less punching the clock is where you'll have your skeptics and where you'll get your pushback. They're looking to do the bare minimum and get by. So you do have to, and every team has some people like that on it. Not that we hire for that. It's just a reality. So you'll want to be mindful about that as you deploy.
And so principle one there is, it's got to start with you, basically. Like if you're not sort of living this day to day, then it's going to be hard to just like bring in a system. And if anybody wants that playbook, go back to episode 1 with Kevin. And so say I'm convinced, like I have these practices myself. Where are the best starting points? Like where are the entryways that don't feel like they're encroaching, that give people the most bang for their buck, and are the places that would help get somebody along this journey with the least friction possible?
I mentioned before the call a case study to go through, as we're kind of unpacking all this, is Greenlight Guru, who's one of our earlier clients, Nick Titman, who founded Tip Top Ventures, and his team with co-founders David Duram and John Spear.
Who introduced me to you as well.
Yeah,
shout out Nick.
They did a great job deploying this through their org early, before this stuff was even known. So they had the challenge of bringing this stuff to their team, and people didn't even know what it was. Like nobody knew what breathwork was. Like Wim Hof wasn't even really on the scene at that point. So they had to deploy this to a skeptical staff that had never even tried this stuff before. So I think as we're kind of talking about how to do this, we can unpack a little their story. Their story got covered in Inc., so it's all public. Inc. magazine did a nice write-up about it called "At This Company, Mental Health Comes First and Results Follow," if anybody wants to Google it. One co-founder, John Spear, who ended up being an investor in our company, was very skeptical about it. And he just kind of sat on the sidelines a little while and watched as we started to work with our sales team. And then he had a breakthrough moment where he was in a call. We were meeting in person at their office. This is early startup days. We went with them all the way from like early days co-working space through their exit. And he was just in one of the sales team meetings, and we would start the meetings off with breathwork. So we'd be sitting there with all the AEs and their sales leader and David, and then John was sitting there too, and we'd just do breathwork. And the first time I did it with the team, I wasn't really sure how it was going to go. I knew how it worked for me. And the team was under a lot of strain, a lot of expectation. People were very anxious. And we just did mental reset breathing, quick 30 breaths, held our breath on the 30th, deep breaths. And then you could just feel the blood pressure in the room just drop. And we all looked at each other and kind of smiled. And then David was like, okay, here's the deal I want to talk about. And the team was just in flow state, probably for the first time, maybe ever. And it was just problem solving. I was there as the mental performance coach, but I'm also savvy in sales. So I was chiming in when needed. But it was just beautiful to watch the team just kind of revel in the energy that just from the breath work, just doing breath work together. And at the end of that, the team left, and David just looked at me. He's like, that was a breakthrough moment for everyone. Thank you. That was awesome. Where do we go from here? Give them opportunities to have breakthrough moments. Once they break through, they'll embrace it and go. Obviously they'll do their own research. They'll subscribe to a program that you want to put in place, whatever it is. But until they really start to understand this can be a game changer for myself or my team, they're gonna watch and find out.
I think that's a really interesting concept of giving them an experience to have a breakthrough moment. And certainly that was the experience that my team had when we did that visualization. Everybody came out of it being like, wow, that was crazy. And I feel like I've never felt before. And there was a halo effect for multiple days where people really felt at the top of their game. And we do this sometimes sauna and cold plunge. We're in a month-to-month business. So we like to say it's we get 12 Super Bowls a year. The last week of the month, the last day of the month is always a crazy sprint. And so usually the first day of the new month, we take everybody to this place called Othership, which is a sauna cold plunge place in Toronto. And that tends to be one of those breakthrough moments where afterwards people walk out of that experience being like, wow, I'm buzzing, I'm feel focused. It's enough to crack open the door to where they're like, all right, so what's Kyle talking about with all this other stuff? Because I feel great after that thing. Or, we've got another group visualization with you guys coming up next week, which will be one of those things. And I think that is a really cool way to think about it. Well, are there other types of breakthrough exercises or breakthrough activities that you think can give people that special thing?
People don't know how good they can feel and how productive they can feel at the same time. They just don't know.
Yeah.
People think, just being high anxiety and just grinding through the day and being dead on weekends, and they think that's normal. If you're in flow state most of the time, you feel great. You love working. You recover well. You love your weekends. You disconnect, all that stuff. You're recovering every day. You don't need mental health days. And I think people don't understand that. So you're opening their mind to something completely new, which is why, again, you got to give them breakthroughs where they start to go, what was that? What happened there? That was different.
Yeah. Are there other types of activities that you would put in that category? If people were thinking about what are the options for them?
When we do breakthroughs with teams, and we can talk deeply about how to execute this on your own, I'm happy to go there. But we typically start with breathwork and visualization, because breathwork is so powerful at shifting state to being centered in equanimity, where you have the most agency and willpower. I think Sam Altman was talking about that last week or in an interview. It was people need agency, they need resilience, etc. But it's breathwork zeroes you out, gives you that agency. And then visualization is such a profound way to shift state any direction you want to take it. So when you pair the two together, it often, you experienced it opens people wide open to these practices. So that's one that we really like. And you can guide this. We do teach a leader that learns how to guide a team in visualization is a powerful leader. Like if you're setting up for, say you're you're a sales manager setting up a team for a big call, you got your solutions engineer, your future CS person, your team lead, whatever, sitting there. If you can guide that team through a visualization of the call and dial them in before going beyond just, how are we going to handle objections, to visualizing handling the objections, that's incredibly powerful. So
Yeah, find some activity, some like challenge to do together.
even the frameworks like we discussed on the last call, people understanding what fight, flight, focus, and freeze are and being able to sense that in themselves is incredibly empowering. There's a private equity company we work with that uses that stuff in deal rooms. Instead of just arguing with each other about like, well, here's my opinion on this or that, they're able to identify the state their partners are in as they're going through and doing a deal. It helps them just be incredibly rational.
What about like short-term challenges? Like one of the things that I've been thinking about for our team is like getting everybody to do like a 2-week gratitude journaling streak, like challenge where, like a group of people, optional, a group of people will like commit to doing some like some single practice for some period of time and then like checking in. Is that enough time? Is that like enough time, or would you start somewhere else? Like, is that the right framing, you think?
I think challenges are fantastic. Even better if you can pair those challenges up with some sort of biometric tracker. Speaking of that company in Greenlight, once they got to the later stages of this, they did just allow anybody on the team who wanted to get like a company-sponsored loop strap. They would have HRV percent increase competitions. They'd have recovery and strain challenges. So the team would be able to do a practice like gratitude journaling and see how it impacted their HRV.
Yeah, I'm I'm addicted to my Oura ring, like because you can do these tests, and now that it's hooked into my OpenClaw instance, it can do like way better analysis of the data. So, like I started taking glycine and theanine before bed to sort of understand if like how that affect my sleep structure, and then like my deep sleep, which is something that like I typically would struggle with comparative to all of my other baseline metrics. Like every other sleep metric was so good other than deep sleep. And I'm like, what's going on with this? I started doing that. I told my open client instance, like this was the date I'm starting. And then 2 weeks later, I had to pull the data, and it's like super compelling. So I think that is another interesting one. I hadn't thought about sponsoring biometrics for the team. That's another cool idea.
Yeah, opt in on their own. I mean, obviously, it's going to help them understand recovery. It's a great tool to implement if you're doing this on your own. Even if we're involved, like we ask, can you do this? It's just to see the metric and understand when you're doing mental performance, you're optimizing for flow state, and flow state's associated with HRV. So if you materially
Oh,
increase your HRV like 20%, you've materially increased the time you're in flow state. That's like you're talking about measuring this. Like, how do you measure this? There's tools that are built to measure like pillars of mental performance, like resilience and confidence. They're questionnaire based. But if you're tracking HRV, you can look at that because that's associated with flow state, and that is the key number one metric you're going for. How do you raise the percent of your team in flow state for longer periods of time?
what are the other metrics that we should be trying to move?
I mean, like I said, HRV is the best correlate. We did build an app that measures the pillars that you want to look at. Resilience, how fast does a team bounce back from adversity? When there's a call that goes sideways, do they jump on the next call strong, or are they carrying the energy from the last call into the next call? So
Mm,
obviously the only way to measure that is with questionnaire at this point. When I have like
okay.
brain scans going on, we can look at to see how the networks are responding. But the ability to zero yourself back out after a tough call, really important to track and measure it in whatever ways you can, even if just anecdotally. So look at
So
resilience.
no office fMRI machine is necessary.
I don't know. But, I mean, pro sports teams are doing stuff like that. They're looking at when they measure group flow by looking at the dynamics of different brains working together. So we're obviously not there yet. I don't know if we ever will be, but yeah, I mean, resilience is a big one. Confidence is associated with resilience, obviously, but that's a big one to look at and try and measure anecdotally. Like you could build
Yeah.
questionnaires for your team looking at confidence. Discipline. So it's like the ability to stay on task when it's boring, to understand the triggers of dopamine that allow you to stay on task is a topic we could talk about. Some people just can't hack that, but that can be learned.
Like, would you encourage the the team to just like keep a journal of these things on their own? Because you're not going to get people giving you very honest answers about their own discipline to you as like the leader. And so would you basically say, hey, like build yourself a journal for this one thing and track it every day over a period of time? Is that the right experience?
Yeah, and that's basically how we've done it with our own app. Is we text them questions, just short questions to look at the pillars.
And do you aggregate that data, or that's all just for the reps' own like understanding?
The leader will have aggregate of all the reps. Obviously, they can't look at it individually. That would cross a line. But yeah, the reps have their own personal data where they can dive in and kind of see how they're ebbing and flowing. It's really interesting to look at how those metrics change, like when you put a new leader in place or go through some sort of challenge. Super, super, super fascinating to see that stuff move.
Shifting gears a little bit. So part of this is like, okay, so breakthrough moment, encourage people to start to track some of this data or track it at an organizational level if you have the tools like your app, for example. How do you think about shifting the culture? Because that's what it's going to take for it to be sustained. So what are the things that make the biggest, longest standing impact there?
Yeah, it takes time. Is the first thing that's important because it is an organic thing. The team's going to adopt this as you go. Look for where your A players are and then deploy techniques and tools to those A players. So I always like to start with the direct managers. So if the companies of a certain size, your frontline managers that have a bunch of reports and are sometimes jumping on deals, their schedules are just totally overloaded, tends to be one of the highest stress positions on a sales team. That's the people who, if you're going to give them coaching, you're going to work with them directly, you're going to really lean in, get them to embrace it. And then they'll start to be able to performance coach their team members. So it's like you're not just doing deal review and, they're asking questions about recovery. They're asking questions about, okay, you seem a little off or you maybe in a flight response. Quarterly visualizations is a great way to keep giving the breakthrough moments. So getting your team together, doing breath work and doing visualization to kick off quarters or kick off months. Because like I said, that's the biggest opportunity to get breakthroughs. Once they get the breakthrough, then there's, we look at 50 different tools. But there's more than that. And that's kind of where people start to dive in. You give access to everything and they start to really understand, what do you need to do to be in flow state constantly, or at least as much of the time as possible. And it's a lot to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And advice that I would give to folks is just pick one thing. Like don't try to bring multiple things to your team at one time. Start with one practice or another. Start with meditation or gratitude or like sleep hygiene. Just pick one thing and try to make that a part of the zeitgeist in the organization, and you can deploy it as training and then do like a contest around it or like bring that as part of your weekly team meetings, but one thing at a time. Like it's super hard to get to change your sleep habits. That feels to me like one of the best starting points if you wanted to like really change how your team operates, just like help them learn to sleep better. And I like Matt Walker's 3-2-1, like don't eat 3 hours before bed, don't drink 2 hours before bed, and no phone an hour before. The phone is where people will struggle, but or even if you do like the blue light blocker glasses, like the proper, like really orange ones, I think are the only ones that really work. But if you can teach people to start going to bed at the same time every night, getting 8 full hours, doing like the right routine, the best practice there is like do a sleep meditation before you go to bed. Like that just brings your heart rate way down, and what you notice is your sleep structure changes so much. It doesn't just help you get to sleep, but your structure changes.
Yeah, you're trying to build habits. Habits take 30 to 90 to 120 days sometimes to put in place. If you try and put 7 habits in place at the exact same time, you're going to fail all 7. If you pick one and you get real serious about it, you'll shift. The brain never wants to rewire. It doesn't want to embrace these new practices. It doesn't want to learn to be better. The brain goes, we've survived this long. Why would we do anything different? Like you're doing great. Why would you change anything? Think about it like your brain is a giant interstate. And it's like, oh, we get to blow up that lane over there and move that on-ramp over there. You think the brain wants to do any of that restructuring? It's like, no. So it will fight you on these things. So you have to be very disciplined about sticking on the one thing until it becomes reflexive and habitual or automatic, and then move on to the next thing. So really becoming great at mental performance it's kind of like a lifelong journey, and it's something that you'll get benefits quickly, and your team will see benefits quickly. But it's like the human operating system, like you said, is just not something that's taught to people. It's not something you learn in elementary school, even though you should be taught it. We don't. So you give your team the gift of teaching them the human operating system, when they're at your company. Great. It's going to help them be better parents. It's going to help them perform better at work. It's going to help them enjoy their lives more. They're going to learn what flow state is, what it's not, and it changes everything. But yeah, it's one thing at a time.
Yeah. My kids go to Montessori, and they actually like weave some of this stuff into it, and they come home and they'll like just mention something. I was like, "Where did you learn that?" They're like, "Oh, Miss Jessica taught us," and it's like I'm so happy because it is so badly needed. So
I went to Montessori. I didn't talk about any of this. So I'm glad things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, we're in Marin County, so they're definitely like it's a different world here. You like our school back in Toronto didn't. And so going back to this question, how do you move the culture? So it takes time. You're deploying it with your A players. We're thinking about like one thing at a time. What would be the one tool or area that you would tell people to take off the shelf? Like say I, as a leader, I'm there. Let's just assume like I'm doing a bunch of these practices myself. I'm living it, which is step one. Where would you tell people to start? Is it meditation? Is it gratitude? Is it sleep? Is it like what would be the place that has the most bang for your buck and has the chance to get people to like, go down that path?
We covered a little bit of this before, but when you crush a pre-call warm-up, that's a breakthrough, because it will materially change the way you'll perform, and that will impact your dollars. If you can get a rep or a manager to do pre-call warm-ups, that's a massive moment, because you think about, okay, well, I'm sleeping better. Oh, I have more energy. I just made, $30,000 more in my commission check this quarter. Like, which one's going to motivate people more?
May you remind people the pre-call warm-up.
You do a little bit of breath work. Okay. So take like 30 deep breaths. And then actually, we didn't get into this. I like to use journaling for rehearsal imagery or visualization.
So maybe just go through this whole framework, because
we got into it a little bit, but like, I'll give a pre-call warm up that I think will be a game changer
cool.
for anybody who does this for. And it doesn't. I don't care if you're like a rep working on deals or you're a CEO trying to sell your company. If you do this before those big deal calls, it should blow your mind, the difference.
Cool.
First thing you got to do is get in equanimity. You got to center yourself. Before you get into a call. I mean, truth of the matter is, I did this morning for this podcast. You have to get yourself centered. Like, you might be thinking about all the different ways this call could go, all the different ways this performance could go. By the way, Hugh Jackman uses this for what it's worth before he does any performances. So he talks about that on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Calls it daily design. Does it every single day. Picks the big performances and then journals as if they're already over. So take a journal out. So do your breath work, get centered, all right? That's to put you in equanimity. That's to get you out of flight, get you out of freeze. Maybe you're procrastinating, doing some prep work or something like that. So get yourself back centered using breath work. 30 deep breaths, big belly breaths, about a second in between each breath, fast. And then hold your breath on the 30th. You'll feel your state start to shift into equanimity, meaning you'll be at the center of the grid we talked about last time. And then at that point, put on some music that fires you up.
And that's the cadence, like through the mouth.
Yep. You're Buddha bellying, your belly's going out. I like to put my hand on my stomach just to make sure I'm taking really deep breaths.
So that's a pretty like rapid pace for okay. But just explain that a little more. I would typically do like a box breath, like if I'm going into something.
So box breathing is, when I'm thinking pre-call warm-up, I'm thinking as efficient as humanly possible.
Okay.
So if I do 30 deep breaths relatively rapidly, I can shift myself into a centered state in about 2 minutes. If I'm using box breathing, it takes me about 5. Now, box breathing is a different kind of state. There's different neurotransmitters and peptides involved. It's going to make you feel a little bit different. But for my personal preference, 30 deep breaths rapidly, shift my state as quickly as I can.
And then you hold your breath for how long?
I'll hold my breath for about as long until I feel the need to breathe. So for me, that's maybe 45 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on where my nervous system is at. Like if I had a really hard day before, then I'll hold my breath for shorter periods.
Okay. So it's until you like really need to breathe.
Yeah, until you're like, all right, I need to breathe.
Okay.
At that point, you're centered. Now you're ready to start initiating some type of visualization activity. So at that point, I like to juice it up a little bit. By the way, before I did the breath work, I might have stood up and maybe bounced around, done some push-ups, or just kind of like stretched, just to like, sitting down is not good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So done all that. Again, this is really rapid. I'm at about 2.5 minutes. I'll put on music that gets me going. I think there's like a song, Higher and Higher. It's by Jackie Robinson. Not sure who it's by, but anyway, it's like Ghostbusters theme song or something from back in the day. Not the actual Ghostbusters theme song, but it's like the one, I can't even remember the scene, but it's a big song from Ghostbusters. And it's just really good, a really good vibe. Turn on a song you really like that pumps you up. And then you take the journal and then you date it at the top that the meeting's over. So you could like date it the next day. And you're playing with yourself a little bit. You're playing with the subconscious mind. At that point, you journal like the call's already over with. So you talk about the outcome, how you showed up, journal about any potential objections, how you handled them cleanly, and just basically go. This is rehearsal imagery. This is what athletes do before anything that they're going to do that's going to be really tough. And you just basically journal about all the behaviors you did. If it's substantially far out from the call, then you can journal about elite prep behaviors. I did those hard discipline things I didn't want to do, and it paid off big time. So this is called mental contrasting, where you're going back and forth between the outcome, the awesome thing that happened, that obviously didn't happen yet, but you want it to happen, and then the things you did to make sure that outcome happened.
Okay. So mental contrasting is juxtaposing the great outcome with the hard work to get it.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Because the great outcome, so the subconscious mind, again, we may have talked about this last one, has a tough time differentiating between what's well imagined and what's really happening. So as you start to imagine a positive outcome, it's going to juice dopamine up. It's going to send serotonin in your nervous system. Like you're going to start to feel all those good flow state neurotransmitters that make you feel great. Neuroplasticity starts to happen because those neurotransmitters are correlated with neuroplasticity. As you raise emotion, the brain starts to change. That's why you can remember all the best and worst things that have ever happened to you so easily. Create a lot of neuroplasticity. So you have neuroplasticity going because you're actually imagining a positive outcome. So the brain's reacting like it's happening. Then you use that neuroplasticity to reinforce and set, and we talked about this last time too, the RAS, the reticular activating system, up to go do the hard things.
Cool.
So you talk about the behaviors in the journaling. If you really want to take it to the next level, I did this for an entire year when I was, I basically was CEO of my first startup and then hired a CEO. Then I went and sold on the West Coast for a year by myself, enterprise. And I did this for every single call. My close rate about doubled. But I would always visualize the case study. So in my journal, I wouldn't go out a day. I would go out like a year. It was my company, so I was really passionate about closing these deals. And I'd be like, just talking about like the case study we did with Microsoft or whatever. I'd be like, yeah, they're just, my main prospect at the time was just singing our praises on video, just talking about change their culture, change their team, whatever. So you could also just journal about like the case study, but just doing that, rehearsing the things you need to do like that, to where you're not saying, okay, I need to respond to this objection this way, and you're super logical about it. You actually get emotional about it like it happened. It puts elite behaviors on autopilot. Again, why all athletes do it.
Momentum is a powerful tool for turning sales and customer conversations into go-to-market intelligence. Using Gen AI, it extracts, analyzes, and automates customer intelligence across your GTM work. The best part, it's not a new platform for your team to adopt. It integrates seamlessly with your existing stack, or it can straight up replace your conversational intelligence tool. At Owner, we ripped out Gong and went all in on Momentum. It writes back to our Salesforce directly, captures forecast and churn risk, autofills CRM fields, shares product signals, and tracks sentiment. Companies like Cursor, Zscaler, Ramp, and 11 Labs use it every day. Check it out with a free trial at momentum.io. Yeah, like the visualization that you and I did, or Alex and I did, like a little more than a year ago, we were coming into like a fundraising push, and the whole visualization was like, what's the party like? What's the celebration? What's the like what emotions are you feeling? Like who are you talking to? And it was such an extraordinarily like realistic feeling. Like I had experienced the outcome already, and then your body naturally is gonna take the actions to reinforce what it believes to be true. Like sometimes you hear people give the woo woo version of that, where it's like, oh, like, imagine it and the universe will give it to you. But it's actually, like the neuroscience version of it is if you attach yourself and you believe in this outcome, and you make that a part of your identity, your brain just like naturally takes a bunch of subconscious action to move you closer to that thing, because it wants to rationalize.
It wants to fulfill the prophecy. But I think it's important to note there, when you talk about the kind of woo-woo version versus the neuroscience version is use that great energy you cultivated to reinforce hard behaviors. Like, don't just visualize the win, use the juice from the win to reinforce all the elite behaviors you need to do to win. That's the difference between kind of the woo version and the neuroscience version. So that's just a really important point. It's great to visualize the win. That's great, but like, gotta reinforce the tough behaviors. Limbic friction's gonna be there. Like, that's the part of our brain that pushes against, creates procrastination and stops us from like doing the tough behaviors. So use the visualization to make sure you're gonna do the hard things.
Can you define limbic friction? Like, what do you mean by that? I think that's an interesting concept to unpack.
Yeah, like the limbic system, so the part of the emotional brain, pretty much makes our decisions. Like, we like to think we're rational decision makers, right? But the emotional brain is making most of our decisions, unfortunately. So when the emotional brain isn't aligned with an outcome, isn't aligned with a tough behavior, you have to fight that. You have to get through that. You have to learn how to basically do it anyway. And that's where all these tools can help you win. It's like most people are lazy. The brain doesn't want to expend energy. Particularly, you think about a situation like, let's talk about why people quit real quick. So, if you think about, most of our neurology was wired in tribal days, a long time ago. We'd be, hunting animals on the plains or something. And, if you were with your team, trying to hunt an animal for an entire day and you didn't see any animals and it gets to dark and you decide to continue, trying to get that animal, what might happen?
You're in danger because now it's dark and you're at risk.
Yeah, so you might get attacked by a predator. So the brain started to develop like kind of a ratio between dopamine and noradrenaline. And once you've deployed the effort molecule noradrenaline for long enough, and there's no dopamine coming in, the brain goes, all right, we need to quit. We're done. Like, you didn't get any reward. Like, we're done. And to be able to fight that, you have to learn how to control dopamine on your own. So tools like visualization, where you can actually give yourself dopamine, is key. I think it might be worth talking about dopamine triggers and like how to control your team's dopamine, because that's a pretty important part of deploying this stuff as a team.
Well, I'm just about to go there. So yeah, talk more about it.
So dopamine's the molecule motivation. It's why we have the society built the way it is. Everything we've figured out, and the expansion of humanity, is because we have a great dopamine reward system. People always talk about the downside of dopamine, but if you want a winning team, you better figure out the upside of dopamine and optimize for it. I know you guys are working on office stuff right now. Is that right, Kyle?
Yeah, we just moved offices for like the third time in 15 months or something.
And you're trying to optimize that environment, right?
Yeah, we moved into like a purpose-built space that has a bunch of these habits designed into the environment as much as we can.
Yeah, exactly. So thinking about how to cultivate dopamine within your team and people cultivating within themselves is powerful as you're designing that new office, as you already know and are thinking about. But yeah, let's talk about some of the triggers of dopamine.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me about it.
Serotonin's worth talking about as well, because it's complementary to dopamine. But with dopamine, you're thinking about the triggers. So progress is a big dopamine trigger. Recognition is a big dopamine trigger. Achievement is a big dopamine trigger. When you think about a lot of Silicon Valley high growth tech companies, they get dopamine on tap because there's so much stories being written about them and like TechCrunch and places like that. So when a company goes through a tough moment and they're not getting those stories, it kind of robs a team of dopamine. So a team has to know how to, or a leader has to know how to regulate their own dopamine. So if you talk about those first few we talked about, so recognition, achievement, a great thing a leader can do to help a team thrive during really challenging periods is learn how to effectively recognize effort. So if you can effectively recognize effort within a team, you pulse the team dopamine iteratively, even during moments where they're not naturally getting it. Maybe they're having a tough quarter or something's going sideways. Then you can actually regulate dopamine on your own.
You should and could do this even when things are going well. So this is one of the principles that I taught my leaders like years ago. When we do shout outs, we'll talk about the outcome because we're spotlighting achievement, but then talk about everything that went into it. So like we've got a CX shout outs channel when people hit quota, when people hit a personal best. This is another thing people need to do more of on the recognition side. Recognize somebody not just being for the best in their segment, because that's only one person, but like recognize everybody who set a personal best. So like in our town halls, anybody who's had a best month ever, like a personal best month ever, they're on like a shout out slide. So you can be number one in the segment, but if you have 4 other people in that segment who all did their personal best, like they deserve that as well. And so then when we do these shout outs, like I'll read one. So this is one of the AEs. It's like, there's a version of sales where people show up, follow the script, and check boxes. Sarah has never been that person. What's defined her path to this promotion is something that's harder to coach than any framework. It's genuine fire. Came into this new segment hungry, got knocked off her personal rhythms and habits during one of the busiest stretches of the year. And instead of making excuses, she sat down with it, looked at her personal life, made some hard choices, and reviewed her demos honestly, identified and took accountability where she was rushing, and chose to go deeper and lean in and learn. And then we talk about like some frameworks that we've just dug into. Yeah, the slump wasn't a detour, it was part of the training and process. And so like this is a rep who like crushed her segment, just got promoted, but like talking about entering in that previous segment and the challenges and how to overcome that challenge and the mentality, like that's the thing we want to reinforce.
Beautiful. Exactly.
It's like, I don't even have to mention this anymore. This is just like a self-reinforcing thing. If like a new manager came in and did a quota shout out that was like outcomes or externally based and not like about the intrinsic, then somebody would be like, hey, by the way, like this is how we write quota shout outs. Because that's the thing that matters. And that's the thing I tell people this all the time. I was like, at some point, owner is going to have a bad stretch. And I actually thought this was going to be last year. I was like, oh, I bet some competitors are going to do some like stuff. And we had been on this streak that I was like, the like slump is coming for us. And so I've been trying to prepare people for that inevitability, because it's easy to have a good culture and like it's easy for things to feel good when you're like smashing the number every single
Exactly.
month. But and we had one of our harder quarters in Q1. Like it was the hardest it was the deepest we had to dig. We have still never missed a quarter, I will say that, but this was the deepest we had to dig to get there. But like the team was prepared. They were inoculated already because of all the stuff and like falling in love with the process.
Yeah, that's called being anti-fragile. I mean, there's a great book, but like you're trying to build out within your team. And by doing what you're doing, which is recognizing the effort of individuals, not just the primary winner, you're building that in. If you can't control the dopamine of your team, you're vulnerable to these slumps. The slumps can take you over. If you learn how to control the dopamine of your team using tools like this, then you have control and you can push through the hard parts where your competitors will falter.
Yeah. The other place I see this be like so important is, sales. There is a lot of there are a lot of influences out of your control. There's a lot of luck involved. The luck is, you can be very lucky in the short term, but generally luck is about equal in the long term. And like Jim Collins did a bunch of research to sort of show this. But the short term swings in luck, you get like a bluebird deal out of nowhere, you're in a bad territory. Like some of that luck can sustain for months. Like if you're in a mid-market enterprise segment and you get a bad patch, like that's bad luck, and that might could stick with you for a year. But in the long run, you will eventually get a great patch with too low of a quota. And Jim Collins talks about return on luck. Return on luck is basically when you get good luck, you take crazy advantage, and when you get bad luck, you're able to minimize the damage. I find that the more if you are too much about the external validation and awards, when bad luck happens and your identity is about performance and not about progress and about the journey, then that bad luck spirals, and you can get into a place where like a bad day or a bad week becomes a bad week or a month or a quarter, and it gets out of hand. Versus, like if you can sit down with a rep and they had 2 deals they were counting on blow out, and like just like a couple bad things have happened. If you have trained people to be inputs focused and journey focused and learning and progress focused, then you can as a manager sit down and be like, well, like, are you happy with how you showed up this week? Did you do the right things? Are you happy with how you ran those deals? Like, yeah, like I ran the deals well. I like, there's no reason I should have lost this deal. Like, okay, well, just like keep doing that, and like it'll turn around. But you can't have that conversation if you've only beat the drum of only the top person in the segment matters and only the number matters. Like you don't have that ability to like help people through the downs. And which is why like I think have shown a really interesting ability to like get people out of their slump. And like we've had tons of our very best performers at the company, like award-winning performers, have been on what we call get on track plans, which is our version of a PIP.
It's beautiful to see people pull through PIPs and weather those storms, and they can. Whether you understood the dopamine dynamics, and you probably did or not, the way you're doing that is perfectly aligned.
What else should people be doing to build this foundation to give people control of their own dopamine? What can I do as a leader?
I tell leaders you need 1 serotonin day at least every 2 weeks. We are constantly striving, constantly using the dopamine reward system, constantly on that treadmill. Dopamine's a molecule of motivation. It's not the molecule of presence. It's not the one that helps us show up and really pay attention to a person, and really listen, open our hearts and kind of just be there with them in that moment, which is what's required to be elite at sales. And we also deplete our reserves. We deplete our dopamine, we deplete noradrenaline. We run on cortisol a lot. So we tax our systems a lot. So an elite performer figures out somehow how to wedge a day into their schedule every couple weeks that is not dopamine related. So yeah, obviously you're running dopamine all the time regardless. But if you can wedge a day in like that outside of your sleep schedule, just a day to be practicing tools that are related to serotonin, then you give yourself a giant chance to recover. And that keeps your dopamine reserves and all the other peptides associated with it high as possible, so that you can be in flow state as much as possible in the other, 13 days outside of the 14. So again, I call that a serotonin day. And I actually, so I have 4 kids, and like my wife and I alternate on it. So one weekend day out of every 2 weeks is her day, and then we rotate and it's my day. So basically every other week we're rotating between days. And you think about serotonin, it's the opposite of dopamine. So it's like dopamine is everything's time bound, it's goal bound. So it's associated with goals. You think of like time and goals. So if you think of like a kid just kicking a soccer ball for the pure joy of it, that's a serotonin activity. You turn kicking a ball into soccer. Now you have a dopamine activity. So you spend a day like you're a kid on the first day of summer with nothing you need to do. You wake up whenever you wake up naturally, you do whatever would be enjoyable for you that doesn't involve dopamine wasting activities we covered on the last episode, like looking at your phone a lot, gambling, shopping, binge watching things. But you just do more like, maybe you do a nice long workout or a nice slow cooked meal or go on a walk or things like that. Meditate. Just very chill activities that aren't associated with time and aren't associated with goals. You do that for a full day, thinking a full 8 hours. That's like a nervous system reset to
Okay.
just reboot everything. And what you'll notice is the next day you'll be in a level of flow that will blow your mind. And that will maintain. And the reason I say every 2 weeks is because that's about the right duration. If you can do it every week, that's great. But if you can do it every 2 weeks, it gives you something to look forward to. It gives you kind of a point to recharge and recover. For people that work really hard, like I know you do, it's a great tool to keep the dopamine system fully charged.
So you do this with your kids in like around?
I would say I don't spend a ton of time with my kids on that day. I might take take one of my kids fishing or something like that, just like do something very chill in nature. Um, but yeah, I mean, Ashley, my wife, has the kids fully covered on that day. I have no parenting responsibilities, no, nothing like that. It's literally a day where I get to feel like a child, which is different.
I don't know if I'll get this every 2 weeks, but
Well, like I said, my wife's pretty into this stuff too. And once we kind of talked about it and understood that we both needed it, that was when we pulled the trigger and figured it out. And it was tough. We had to kind of, shoehorn it in, but now we're in a nice rhythm with it. And we've been doing that for probably a decade.
the phone has to be gone for it. I've been thinking about this for like weeks now, just having a day where I don't open Slack or my computer or whatever at all. But like that might make me more on edge to just not open my email or Slack, but I know I need to do it.
You might feel a little bit of that the first few times you do this. You might feel it sometimes when you come off of a 13 days and you just been pushing as hard as you possibly can. You might come into that day pretty on edge. That's the point. Is you're giving your nervous system a chance to live, not under those pressures for just a moment to replenish the system. You might find that for the first few hours, just be like cycling through a bunch of thoughts that never got attention. So you think about meditation when you're like watching the thoughts, letting them go. You're kind of like doing that in real time at the beginning of this day. There'll be a few times where you're kind of lost in thought about things that you just needed to think about, that you just keep kind of suppressing and pushing off. I like to tell people when I'm kind of training people on how to do this, the big pro for you, Kyle, and for any other leaders or anybody else, frankly, is you're going to try not to think about work stuff and you're going to go do things you enjoy. So you're shifting your state into a nice place. You're trying not to think about work stuff. But what's naturally going to happen is creative thoughts are going to start to bubble up. So we call this bottom up thinking versus top down thinking. Top down is like dopamine networks. You're pushing, you're forcing your way through life. Serotonin is a lot more easygoing, but all creative thinking comes from bottom up. So you're those aha moments. It's basically like, I like to talk about shower moments, where you're in the shower and you have great ideas coming. You'll get that the whole day. Like you'll be off on a walk or something. And you'll be like, oh, that's because you gave yourself a whole day without pressure. And the brain will naturally start bubbling up. Okay, this is how you solve this problem. This is how you'll solve this problem. It's a great day just for creative thinking. So whenever I'm talking to leaders, like, you have to do this because you need that creativity. In the age of AI, it's about the quality of our thinking, not so much about the grind. It's like, how high quality can your thinking be? These type of days are really important for that.
I struggle with this so much individually. Like even when we go on vacation, I want to be filling my time with either doing activities with kids or exercising or reading a book. Like I can't just sit. You see people sitting around a pool just doing nothing, or reading a fiction book, and I get so stir crazy if I'm not making progress on something.
Yep.
I gotta be reading, I want to read a bio or a business book or a but I enjoy that. I feel like that gives me making progress gives me a lot of fulfillment. And so when I'm not making progress on
Yeah, it's a
anything,
dopamine trigger. Progress is a dopamine trigger.
yeah, even clean, if I would rather clean than sit around. I would rather do on the weekends. I have to find some activity to fill my time. And maybe that's the whole point of this, but because I don't find myself seeking, I'm not
okay.
I want to chill and do nothing for a day. That sort of scares me.
Let's talk about the difference again. The kid kicking the ball is a serotonin activity. Soccer is a dopamine activity. So it is learning how to be present without striving. You can clean the house. You do it at a slow, relaxed pace without a big focus on the outcome. They talk about this in mindfulness. Like enjoy washing the dish slowly.
Yeah.
Wax on, wax off, Karate Kid, whatever. Like you immerse yourself in that exercise. If you're doing, like I said, slow cooked meal, make a great meal for your family. Take your time, give yourself like 3 hours to do it, and then just like do it perfectly, but not where you're trying to achieve some great outcome. Just enjoy, maybe you're with your wife cooking with her, like just enjoy the banter and just doing it slow. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like just give yourself that opportunity to do things at an unrushed and unhurried pace.
That's as close to that's like probably my serotonin activity where I like will actually shut off and lock into something. Okay.
If you enjoy it and you're not sitting there gambling, sports betting the entire time.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people. Yeah, you enter sports betting into watching sports. Now you're deep in dopamine.
Okay.
Because surprise, novelty, variety are also massive dopamine triggers. So with gambling, you get all of that.
We embed a bunch of those principles into our spiffs and contests. Like there's always these things called wrinkles. So like people will know it's like, oh, we're going to do a week-long spiff. After 2 days, there's going to be some like weird change of the rules. And on the last day, there's going to be like triple the points available so that like, middle of the pack could get back in it. And it makes it fun and like exciting. But, some of those things I took from the book Hooked. Back to vitality and recovery, serotonin day. I will endeavor. I'll text you when I do.
Yeah, give it a shot, man. I'd love to hear how it goes.
Maybe I'll do a serotonin morning, and we'll start there. But what else can we do for vitality and recovery? And specifically, like what are the tools we can bring to our teams?
If your team adopts WHOOP straps or some sort of HRV tracker, you can have recovery contests. So who had the best HRV recovery scores on WHOOP, things like that. So Greenlight did that. That's one of those things they wrote about in the Sync article. They did both strain and recovery. So for those who volunteered to do it, like they had a strain contest, and the CEO really tried to go after it. That's why I talk about the leader embracing it. Like David was like, I don't think it was on WHOOP straps. It's like at 22 or something like that. There's like this like level of strain that's like impossible to get, and like he went after it as hard as he could. I think he got beat by one of his CS leaders or something. But like he killed himself for a day in the strain contest, and I think. But yeah, recovery is the other side of that. So you can have like little recovery contests. But yet, like you said, 3, 2, 1. I don't know that method myself, but that learning how to sleep well and learning how to wind yourself down, how to cool down for the evening, is massive. So just giving the team some sleep training on that, and like I said, maybe pair that up with a biometric tracker that can kind of show them how it's working. One of my favorite things about the biometric trackers in recovery is it. I drink probably a couple times a year right now, only in like family parties where I'm really just letting loose, because I realize I used to drink more. I realized I was like, gosh, this impacts my HRE for like 3 or 4 days. Like as I get older, like I'm just done doing this. It's not worth the performance hijacking.
Yeah, I had like 3 drinks. I had like 3 or 4 drinks on Saturday night, and my HRV was like 51 the next day compared to like today, or today it's like 88.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like crazy. Once you start tracking this stuff, the best way to get somebody to like start living healthier is just show them their data, like show them how like good or not good it is, and then you start to be like, all right. So the funny story about back to the Matt Walker book, I used to sleep like 5 hours a night for a lot of the time because I was just working like a psycho and training, training 3 hours a day, and always wondering like, why am I always injured? I have such bad injury luck.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like this is the thing that I'm like, so this is why I like want to bring it to people, is because I had 2 knee surgeries, almost had to have back surgery. I was always so badly dinged up because I was training like an animal for 3 hours a day doing MMA. And then I would sleep 5 hours and I would go out and drink like Friday, Saturday night. And I was like, man, I got bad injury luck. And
luck.
I know. God. And then I read the Matt Walker book, and the first chapter like scared me straight. It's like, if you're not sleeping 8 hours a night, like you're giving yourself Alzheimer and cancer and like all this stuff. I was like, holy crap. And this was like 2015, I think. And because he went on to Rogan and I heard him talk about like all the sleep stuff. I was like, I gotta read this book. And it was like I was one chapter in. I was like, okay, I'm gonna for 2 weeks try to sleep like 8 hours a night. I'm gonna like do that. And after like 4 or 5 days, I woke up feeling superhuman. I was like, I never knew I could feel like this. And once you start to like commit to some protocol that gives you some of that traction, then people get pulled in. You can see now, and there was no sleep, there was no like tracking data or whatever back then, I don't think. Oh no, there was, because my Sleepwatch scores, which was like the old school app I used back then, I went from like mid 500s to 600s to like now my sleep scores were in the top 1% of all like Sleepwatch users.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like I could take on the world. I was like, what was I doing? Like, what the,
Yeah,
like, I can't believe I felt like that.
it's crazy. Again, people don't
So
know how good you can feel. Like, people just don't
yeah,
know.
this is where like the contest or the whatever is I think a good idea, because you just need to give people enough enough of a taste to be like, oh damn, like yeah, I can if I make like one important change, 3 2 1, or I give up the post 11 a.m. coffees, or like eliminate, the best one is just like stop drinking for 2 weeks and look at what happens to the data. That's an easy way to get somebody going from like 20 drinks a week to 5.
Yeah, exactly. I think with this, how do we deploy this stuff in teams? I don't think it's super complicated. I mean, you've been saying it. Pick a thing every quarter. We've covered a few things today. There's plenty
Yeah.
others. Roll it out to the team in a gamified fashion, some sort of contest, something like that. Give people opportunities for breakthrough moments. And once you have somebody have a breakthrough moment, they're going to take it on themselves to learn these tools. Now, you can obviously
Yeah.
deploy a program in that they can grab at that point, or they can go off and do it on their own. But yeah, it's just, and you can think about it for yourself, and I can think about it for myself personally. The way I feel right now, like my life right now, the way I felt over the last month, if I compared that to the way I felt 15 years ago when I was making my first startup, my prior self would be like, WTF, what the hell happened? Why are you so much happier? Why are you so much more in the zone? Why are you so much more productive? Like, and it happens iteratively and incrementally over years. You just slowly implement these tools one at a time, and then they compound, and it's like you're in flow state nearly all the time, or at least it feels that way.
Mhm.
But
I
it's
think that's
just
one of the most important messages, is just try to take on one thing. Like trying to do it all will lead you basically nowhere, but try to pick like one high impact habit, and like really commit to it for a series of weeks and see where it
30
takes
days
you.
minimum, own the habit. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, whether it's sleep or the pre-call warm-up that you're talking about, or gratitude practice, or like, and start with something lightweight. That's the other, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but like start with the one that has the highest impact for the lowest effort. Because oftentimes if you're like, hey, pick up meditation, it's like 10 or 15 minutes every day, and like, you got to find time. And if it's like not natural for you, or you like live with a roommate, or like you're on the go constantly, it's sort of awkward to like find that moment, and it's difficult to fit in. Versus you can make like a couple smaller changes that give people the taste, and be like, oh, maybe there's something to this.
Mhm.
um that I think is like that's gets the ball rolling, and then I'm sure potentially that activates your dopamine system to like want to do
Mhm.
more of it.
Yeah, that's how the reward system works.
Yeah, want to do more of it. And then, like if I compare my like daily like if you had told, again, like 10 or 15 year ago me, my like daily rituals, they'd be like, you're out of your mind. Like how do you have time for any of it? But you just like fit in the little things. It's like, oh, like, or like I sleep, like I tape my mouth shut and I wear like I wear these glasses before I go to bed, and I wear an eye mask, and then I do this, and I do, and I got this 8 sleep mattress. Like, if you did add up all of these things, it does seem like sort of wild, but you just add like one thing at a time, and like slowly it adds up. And I don't think about it. Like, I'm like, oh, I got to remember to put on my glasses, or I got to remember to take the glycine. It's just, they just become your baseline. And so it doesn't feel like it's cognitive overload or juggling too much.
Not at all. If you build them over time, like you have. And yeah, the benefit is obvious. 5x productivity. That's the difference in productivity when you're in flow state. 5x, 5 times faster, 5 times more productive, 5 times better. Like, more of that, please. So you put it, you do spend a little time. Maybe you spend 15 minutes meditating, or you have some practices you do before bed or when you wake up to get 5x productivity. I'll make that trade anytime.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the last question I wanted to ask about, like, shared language. So one of the things that's so important is, building into your organization like a new shared language around these topics. Like, where do you encourage people to start to build this internally, so that like it starts to become more of just like like a topic that is always on the go?
The shared language comes from neuroscience and performance psychology. So you don't have to like reinvent the wheel.
Mm.
You don't gotta, there's no like woo-woo concepts aren't needed anymore. There's things that are either validated or not validated. So you can pull everything from neuroscience. You don't need to go off and get like a degree in the field like I did. You just watch Huberman and pull stuff down from there, however you want to do
Yeah.
it. The
Where's
best,
like the first place you'd encourage people to go? So you want to get people health pilled, or performance psychology
I
pilled.
really like Huberman, man. He does a great
Yeah.
job of taking super complex topics. They're all evidence-based and then deploying them. So I just go to YouTube and search for him and then look at his topics and start pulling stuff from his bank. He's done like 500 videos or something. Now they're long and detailed, but you got
But
to
you can
start
do
to
the
wrap.
summary ones.
Yep.
They're called essentials, I think. And so the ones that I always tell people to go to is dopamine, sleep, and alcohol. Like, he did the alcohol episode he did a bunch of years ago was one of the episodes. Like, I got to go to, like, I don't go to 0, but I got to get my drinking baseline to basically 0 a week. And
Yep.
if I'm on the road or at work stuff, whatever, I don't know, that's fine. But even then, it's pretty limited. But are there other topics where you tell people to start with, on top of like
I mean,
dopamine, sleep, alcohol?
with the team, I always start with those performance zones. So like we talked about activation on the y-axis, emotionality on the x-axis, the 4 states, like give them awareness of that. That's like the starting point. It's like, oh, the way I feel today isn't I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I'm actually in a freeze response. Okay, now I have something I can wrap my head around and I can deal with. And then you talk about the tools of how to work with that state. But yeah, shared language, those 4 zones, understanding, the way they're structured. Like if I'm going to give like a training or something, just one to a team, like that's the one I'm going to do.
Okay, cool.
That's
Do you
everything.
guys
Everything
have
starts from that
content?
awareness.
Do you guys have content on that? I know we covered a bunch of it on the previous pod, where people can go back to.
There is content on LinkedIn. Check me out at Kevin J. Bailey. That's my LinkedIn account. There is stuff on LinkedIn I published about all this.
All right, we're out of time, so we'll call it there. This was great. I feel like we gave people a place to start and some structure, and some like real tools to take away. So appreciate you joining again. I'm sure this one will be just as popular, and I'll let you know how the reception is.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Thank you for listening to the Revenue Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, and you can find a link in the show notes. And be sure to leave a 5-star review, share it with your network, and please join me next Wednesday for another great conversation.